Hello everyone. Hey guys, Alex here. Just gonna wait a little bit. Hey, how's it going? Hey Kelsey. Hey Haley, how's it going? Hello, hey people. How's everyone doing today? I am post call. I was at the hospital last night, so I am just hanging around at home getting things done. Hey guys. Hello new people. How's it going? Hey, where's everyone at today? I'm in Chicago right now. Hey guys. Hey, thanks for joining. I'm Alex. I am the blogger over at digprimal.com. I have an Instagram account. Did you sleep? Hey, Haley. I actually did. Last night was a really great night. So are you a nurse living a holistic lifestyle? I'm an MD. I'm an anesthesiology resident. I work at the University of Chicago. I'm in training right now. I'm finishing. So I was on, thanks for the hearts, guys. Love them. Yeah, so I was saying I'm over at Dig Primal. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so I've been doing that for a couple years now. I've had a lot of struggles. Go Cubs, right? Yeah, 2016. Seriously, I think we're getting there. I've been struggling. Yeah, it is windy today. I've been struggling with hormonal problems for a couple years now. That's how I got into this whole holistic idea and how I started eating more healthy. And so I'm trying to get that information out there because I know getting your hormones under control and knowing even how it works is so complicated and can be so frustrating and looked up on. So today I'm going to be doodling a whole bunch for you. I have a little drawing here that I started, but I'm going to actually start with a completely blank white piece of paper, and then we're going to get started. I'm going to draw it all out for you. So I think, thank you for the hearts, guys. I love it. I'm always so nervous to Periscope. So I really appreciate you guys coming. So first, before I start, if you have any questions about the subject, I'm going through just a normal hormonal cycle, everything that goes up and down, how it relates to one another. And then I'm going to talk about how it can break down and how the different levels can change, and then how that actually impacts your period. So how the symptoms that you have, how you can sort of tell what's going on with your hormones. There might be a couple different options, but you can start to narrow it down. So if you have any questions, ask them now, because I'm going to be turning the camera around and I'm going to be drawing. So I won't be able to answer questions right away. So let's do questions in the beginning. If you have anything specifically, if not, I'll just get started. And then you can ask me at the end. All right. Hi, Alex. Hey, I've only caught one other scope. Yours great to be here. Oh, thanks. Thank you so much for coming. I really love it. As a healthcare provider, how do you manage this? Oh, that is a really good question. It's really hard. So, and by manage this, I assume you're talking about hormonal issues. Hormonal issues, you work overnight. Yeah. Do you use valerian root leading up to your period for cramping? Will you address hormones affecting fertility? Fertility will play a role, yes. As an RN, I do. Yeah, so, all right, let me answer this. Let me write these down. 17, okay. Okay, so we'll talk about, how it affects fertility. Let me just jot these down. The problems of no periods. That's especially in a 17-year-old. That's a different scenario than someone who's older who isn't having a period. We'll talk about working overnight because it's really, really hard. And I have to focus a lot on, oh, this one's right, focusing a lot on managing my hormones because my lifestyle impacts, and everyone's lifestyle really impacts. I was ovulating a week prior, but my friend said I could still be ovulating. I think maybe you had a typo there, but yeah, definitely. Yeah, the question. We'll talk about the question of ovulation as well from the pain question. Sorry. Can you ask one more time? I didn't catch that one. I'm sorry. I know sometimes I wish people could just pipe up and talk back to me. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm glad you're LOLing and not mad. I'm sorry. All right, so working overnight and how do you manage this? So that is a whole nother topic, managing it. Anyone who's joined, I'm Alex, I'm from digprimal.com. I mostly focus on holistic health from the, Valerian root, thanks. From the hormonal aspect side of things. I am really into pelvic pain. I'm going to be a pain doctor once I finish my anesthesia residency. And yeah, thanks for the reminder. And so that's what I like to focus on. I just also like to focus on general, like gut health, alignment, all that good stuff. I have a program with Megan of Ginger Nutrition, where we do a specific 3-month program with people that is all about balancing hormones. For that reason, it would take me a really long time to tell you how I manage it because there's so many options and so many aspects of it, but we can touch on a couple of the more specific things. All right, so any last questions before I get started? Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Oh yeah, so someone had bad pains a day ago, and someone who's an RN said it could be ovulating, but you thought you ovulated a week ago. Okay. So a lot of things, okay, at the end, can you share what you've studied to get where you are? Sure. Okay, so mid-cycle pain can definitely be ovulation. It can also be because your bladder and your gut are right there, then a lot of times that can be a factor too. On progesterone for 6 months and still spotting, cramps and tenderness. Yeah, we'll talk about progesterone levels. I've been on, you totally get ovulation pains. Yeah, absolutely. I've been on progesterone in the past, so I can definitely speak about that and how that relates. Right. Yeah, so a lot of, you can have mid-cycle pain. You can also have, like I said, bowel and bladder pain. And you can have sometimes just the way the uterus and the ovaries move over time, you can actually get just like kind of random pains that don't necessarily signify that you have a long-lasting problem. Now, if it keeps happening, a lot of times that's a red flag for structural abnormalities like myomas, fibroids, ruptured cyst. Yep, exactly. Your friend was right. And it can be endometriosis, adhesions, and stuff like that. Oh, thanks for the hearts, guys. I love it. Hair loss, breakouts, low thyroid, natural remedies. That we might have to get into for another time, but I will jot it down because I'm always looking for ideas. I will do an entire thing on hair loss because that's a really, really interesting topic, something I've struggled with, and I know it can be devastating for your self-esteem and kind of how you feel about things because it's your hair and you're losing it in huge chunks. So, but that might be a topic for another day. Okay, so thank you guys for coming. Let's get started. I'm going to flip my camera around and we're going to, I'm going to start drawing for you. Okay, so we're going to start with a completely blank piece of paper. And there are actually going to be 3 different areas that we're going to talk about. So there's going to be our ovaries. Okay, then there's going to be hormones, and that's the cycles that we're going to draw, and then we're going to talk about the uterus, what's going on. So all of these 3 will line up at every single stage, so that's how that's going to work. Now we are actually, since it's a cycle, you can start on any day, but we're going to start on day 5 to 7. Depending on when your, how long your cycle is, you can actually get, shortening or lengthening of this. But it's basically, we're going to use this to signify when your period is over. Okay? All right. So let's start with what's going on at the ovary, at the level of the ovary. So there's the ovary, and then there's the hypothalamus and the pituitary. All 3 of these things are going to start the hormonal cascade. But let's talk about when your ovaries get the signal from your hypothalamus and your pituitary. This is your ovary. She starts the maturation of multiple follicles. So these are eggs that you have stored that start to go through divisions, and one of them is going to win, but at any given month, you're going to use and start to proliferate about 10 to 12 of them, okay? So this is getting a signal from your brain, and this is what's happening at the level of your ovaries. One really important hormone that's going to come out from your pituitary is called LH, and that's actually what you measure when you take an ovulation test. So that is going to start to rise like this. Okay, so then once you start having a lot develop, then one of them is going to win. So here's your ovary now, a couple days later, and one of the eggs and one of the follicles is winning. And that's actually making estrogen. Okay, so our estrogen is going to go in blue. All right, so our estrogen is going to, as the follicles mature, it's actually going to rise like this. Okay? And once one of these follicles matures, the estrogen is going to get to a critical level, and that's going to send a signal to your brain that there needs to be an LH surge. So then the LH output from your brain is going to go like this. Whoop! It's going to peak, and then for the rest of the time, it's going to fall. Okay? And so once that LH surge happens, that is LH, then your estrogen production from your ovary is going to rise dramatically. Okay, and we'll leave it there because what happens after that depends on if you get pregnant or not. All right, so then after this LH surge happens and the estrogen peaks, your ovary now is going to actually release that egg. Okay, so it's going to rupture. There it is. Okay, it's going to go do its thing with the sperm or whatever. Okay, so then after that, estrogen levels drop, but they start to plateau. And then once the ovary gets rid of the egg, what it makes is a thing called a corpus callosum, and it's basically like a scar on your ovary that produces progesterone. It's in charge of producing progesterone until you get pregnant and the placenta is big enough and strong enough to take over progesterone production. So this is what keeps all of those levels steady. So then let's add progesterone to our little drawing. It's going to go in this teal color. So progesterone starts out pretty low in the beginning of the cycle. But once you hit this part where the egg gets released, then it all of a sudden starts shooting up and it goes above estrogen. And estrogen and it kind of hang out, and they should be at a good level relative to one another. And everything's good to go. And so then that rises. And then if you don't get pregnant, which is the egg is hanging out in the fallopian tubes, if it doesn't meet any sperm at that point, then all of these things start to plummet really quickly. And then you get your period. Obviously, if you get pregnant, all these things continue to rise and they go up. Thanks for the hearts, everyone. Okay, all right, so that's that. The way that it's named is when you have problems with it. This first half, if you cut it right down the middle like this, you take it right here, this side is called the follicular phase. And that's because the follicles are kind of what's keeping everything going. And then this is the luteal phase because of what's happening here. Okay, so then let's look at what's happening at the level of the uterus at every point. So if we said day 5 to 7 was when you stop bleeding. Sorry guys, my hands are like kind of shaky. So your uterus is like relatively empty. So there's not a whole lot going on in there. Okay. Then as the estrogen goes, so that, don't forget our estrogen is this blue line. Actually, I should mark it. And then, where did my marker just go? This is the progesterone. Okay. So at this point, there's not too much happening. What's mostly happening is at the level of the ovary and at the follicles. Then as the estrogen starts to rise over the first half of the cycle until it peaks, what it does to our uterus is that it begins to proliferate the endometrial lining. So, and that's just the lining that we shed at the end of every month. So what it does is make it thicker, like this. I mean, it's not like this, but that's my drawing of it. As you can tell, I'm not an artist, but that's what it does. It basically makes it thick enough so that something can come and plant, or rather, you know, wide in diameter. When people do transvaginal ultrasounds to look at your lining, they're looking at how many millimeters thick it is. And then when progesterone comes into play around here, what it does, it no longer thickens the lining in terms of how many millimeters wide it is, but it takes what already happened with the estrogen and it makes it proliferate, which makes it nice and thick. It increases nutrients to this and it increases blood flow. So it looks, on ultrasound, these are actually somewhat representative. A lot of times there's a lot more gray here on ultrasound. Here it looks just like a lot thicker. And then what happens is that the egg, once it meets the sperm, you make the embryo, then it can implant. Oh, thank you for the visuals. Oh, no problem, guys. I hope this is all making sense. And so then it can come and plant. You know, the problem with fertility and the questions you were asking are really great is because and at any part of this, when it gets messed up, it can impact your fertility because the embryo really needs this type of environment. The way my mentor used to say it was, you want to create an actual guest stream for your embryo and have it be a nice bed with, flowers and a towel on the bed and all of that stuff. What happens when you don't have this type of lining is kind of like you saying to the embryo, well, here's a cot, you can crash for a couple days, but really I don't have the space, I need you out. So this is, kind of what happens. And then if you don't get pregnant and your period comes, then basically as all of the hormones plummet, then the lining breaks down entirely and it comes out. Okay, so this is normal. Now I can pay attention to questions. What questions do you have for me? I had a miscarriage because your lining wasn't thick enough. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's really hard. Yeah. Yeah, oh, I'm so sorry. That's really hard. I hope it's okay now. I hope you're working with someone on that. I'm going to wait just a few more seconds to let people type questions if you have any. Oh, sorry guys, this is so shaky. Thanks for the hearts, guys. I assume that means you guys are finding this helpful. That's good. All right, so it doesn't seem like right now there are any questions, so I'm going to go on about, oh, you got pregnant right away after the, awesome. Oh, that's great. That's amazing. I am hoping to get pregnant soon too. That's awesome. A couple months later. Well, good for you. I'm happy that happened. I'm working on that myself. All right, so let's talk about how things can get broken down. So you can have follicular phase defects. Does estrogen thicken lining? Yes, it does. This was this thing. So it basically makes it go thicker, 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 and then it'll stop. It won't get any thicker, but it will get fuller and more denser. More denser. I don't think that's how you say it. Okay, so you can have follicular phase defects, or you can have luteal phase defects. Luteal phase defects are much more common than follicular phase defects because so many things can mess with our ratios of progesterone and estrogen normally. But follicular phase defects basically come from a lack of input from the LH So your hypothalamus and your pituitary aren't signaling the way they ought to. Or your estrogen levels there's not enough of an input where your estrogen levels rise high enough, so you get a thin lining. And then when your output of estrogen from the ovary is low, a lot of times the corpus callosum suffers as a result. So, when a problem in the beginning will have downstream effects all the time. So follicular phase defects are a lot of times harder to deal with because you'll have a downstream effect of all of these things. So you won't have as much of an LH surge. Your estrogen levels from the ovaries will be lower. Your corpus callosum won't, either you won't ovulate at all, or you won't have as much of a robust corpus callosum, and your progesterone levels will also be low. The net effect then is a thin endometrial lining that's unstable because it hasn't proliferated and gotten dense enough, and you can have the symptoms of low hormones like hair falling out, acne, low libido, fatigue, GI disturbances, things like constipation, mood disorders, and then a lot of times low progesterone means spotting. So spotting at the second half of the cycle is a big indicator that this lining is unstable. Follicular phase or luteal phase defects are more common, and things happen okay up to here, and then there's not enough reserve, either from progesterone steal if you're really stressed out on a regular basis, if you have adrenal and fatigue, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal dysfunction, and things like that. You can actually, your progesterone levels will drop and your estrogen levels will stay the same. So a lot of times that has spotting as well. You'll notice a trend. Spotting is a big thing because progesterone is so easily affected. You can also get, from exposure to toxins in your environment, you can have a defect that we just talked about, the same one, where your progesterone is low, but in comparison, your estrogen level to your body appears high. And that's because hormonal disruptors in our environment can act as estrogen on our receptors. And so it makes the body think there's more estrogen. So what happens when there's more estrogen is you get a thicker lining. It's like just bigger in how high it is. And then it's unstable. So a lot of times that's when you not only have spotting, but really heavy periods, lots of clots, really bad cramps, because you physically have so much more stuff in your uterus that you are getting rid of during your period. And so that is really common as well. So these are, sometimes I feel when I ovulate and break out on one side of my chin. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that can happen as you can imagine, this is a lot. And so you can have either very small to very large abnormalities every single month, because by day 5, so things that you did before day 5, if they impact this, you could have for that entire month downstream effects. So when you're ovulating and then breaking out, the way these rise and fall, the progesterone is supposed to increase and the estrogen is supposed to decrease. A lot of times with breakouts, it's because estrogen is higher in proportion than it should be to progesterone, and that has the symptoms of high estrogen levels. Now, what's weird is that you could actually have both your progesterone and your estrogen be low, like completely low, but estrogen makes acne. It's one of the things that makes acne, yes. But if your estrogen is higher proportionally to progesterone, so they're basically closer together, you have symptoms of estrogen excess, which sounds really counterintuitive, because you're like, but it's low. So it's not the absolute number that matters, it's the ratio of them in a lot of cases. Hopefully that made sense. But yeah, the acne can be, oops, sorry. No! Hello? Hi. Oh no. Hi. Guys, oh my gosh, sorry. I think I dropped my phone and I totally lost you guys. Okay, hey. Okay, thanks. Oh, that was awkward. I'm like, hi. I shouldn't be allowed to do this. Okay. Anyways, I was going to turn on my phone so I could answer. You're on. Thanks, guys. You guys are very sweet to make me feel better. Oh. I know. I am human. Oh, too much so. How do you minimize or stop acne? That's a really tough one because virtually all of these things plus gut dysfunction will give you the symptom of acne. And so it's almost never that easy. Now, one thing that one of the easiest ways that you can decrease your estrogen balance, like a lot of people have low estrogen progesterone, but the estrogen is high in proportion. That's what I was just telling you about. And one of the reasons that happens so commonly is because of our environmental exposure. So one of the best things that I think people can start with when decreasing and balancing their hormones is reworking their environment. So Ginger Nutrition and I right now have a 30-day toxic home makeover challenge going on that you guys are welcome to. You don't have to, you can get the PDF. This is the URL. It's healthyhormonesgroup.com/toxic-home. It's just a free PDF that we're giving away. But if you don't want that right now, you can just go over to our Instagram accounts. Mine's just Dig Primal. That's DIGPRIMAL. And we just do a daily post, like how we go about cleaning out our environment. And a lot of times that helps decrease your exposure to estrogen-like compounds, and that can help. But the other thing I would do besides working on hormone health is really focus on gut health. So leaky gut a lot of times is related to acne because of the gut-skin the connection between the gut and the skin. And so that usually addressing that helps people's acne the most. I follow Ginger and love that free resource. So helpful. Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you found that helpful. Yeah, her and I worked on it a lot and tried to fill it out. And, well, she originally wrote it and then I've just been helping. And, yeah, I'm glad to hear that you guys are finding it helpful. Yeah, no problem. All right, so let's make sure now that we have, okay, now that we, thanks for the hearts, guys. I'm still like blushing from let's make sure we covered everything. So fertility, my periods are heavy and I break out every other month. Every other month. I wonder why. I don't know why every other month. I have low progesterone and estrogen, having a very hard time getting pregnant. Absolutely. So, I had the same thing. I had low estrogen and progesterone. I did an elimination diet. I got rid of a lot of problem foods, allergens, and things I was having problems with. I cleaned up my environment, focused more on sleep, focused on eating more. A lot of times for hormone health, it comes down to making sure you're getting enough complex carbs, making sure you get enough fats. I do a tablespoon of coconut pretty much every day. Oh yeah, anxiety during ovulation and anxiety and depression during PMS. Yes, we'll talk about that too. Okay. Okay, let me scooch back to the one that I started to answer, and then I'll get to the rest. So I was first started with fertility. So fertility, as you can see, at any point in this, when the levels are low, messes with the lining. The other thing that you have to worry about is whether the input from the hypothalamus and the pituitary up here is getting to the ovaries, and are your ovaries actually listening? Sometimes the brain is giving out the signal and the ovaries are like, they're doing their thing. And so there are a couple ways to check. So what most reproductive endocrinologists do is I'm going to turn it around for a second. I'm going to hope I don't. Okay. So like when I went, I got tested at every 3 or 4 days at every single part of the cycle. And they basically compare what your levels are to what normal levels are. And do these hormones follow the curves that they're supposed to follow? They can also see every time they do the blood work, they do a transvaginal ultrasound and they look at what your ovaries are doing. So do they see a follicle? You know, they can see multiple follicles here. Do they see one that won out? And then is there a rupture on your ovary? That's kind of a marker for did you ovulate in addition to the LH surge. And then do they see this corpus callosum structure? So that's helpful. And then on the same transvaginal ultrasound, they can take a look and measure, is your lining thick enough? And then they can assess the density. So a lot of times, that's the start. That's the start of infertility evaluation workup, and then you can get a good feel like, do you have a follicular phase defect? Do you have a luteal phase defect? And the treatments are different. There are, things like supplemental progesterone, like someone mentioned, it can help stabilize the lining. So in a lot of people with luteal phase defects, which is the second half of the cycle, you have you just have that unstable lining, and so everything can be working fine up until then. You're releasing an egg, you're getting a normal thick lining, but it's just not stable enough to implant, and so progesterone supplementation can really help. Sometimes estrogen supplementation in the first half of the cycle, and then progesterone half in the second, just to mimic that normal response. So that's fertility, and definitely all of these things can impact fertility from that level. No periods are really common. The two most common reasons for that. Do some people ovulate more on one side? Yeah, I think there's variability. Sometimes it'll be like 2 months on one side, then 1 month, 2 months, 2 months. Like they just take turns. And I think it changes throughout your life. It's basically whatever follicle wins, and that's putting out the most hormones. So no periods cause are, you're either, especially in a 17-year-old, you're either not, will this be on Catch? No, I don't have Catch because it won't let me sync this account on Periscope to my Twitter. So you can get this, you can get the replay by signing up for my email list, and I will email it out on Friday. I just give people 2 days to sign up, and then I'll send it out. Or if you email me, I'll just send it to you. So the no periods, you're either not ovulating, so there's not enough signal from your hypothalamus and your pituitary to your ovaries, and so you don't ovulate. The other really common thing is that when people don't eat enough, or they skimp on either carbs or fats, or exercise too much, you can see that it's related there. You can lose your period because of it's your hypothalamus acting up, not necessarily your ovaries, which is a good thing because ovaries are, harder to deal with, but messing with your hypothalamus affects every part of your endocrine system and a lot of other organ systems. So you really don't, if it's something that you can avoid, if you're under eating, over exercising, you definitely want to be cognizant of that. Okay, working overnight can definitely mess with your periods because the amplitude and the frequency from your brain is changed. So I unfortunately don't have too much that you can modify because you are working overnight. What I would say is that if you work overnight, the sleep that you do get really has to be good sleep. So making sure that you are making it a really dark environment, quiet, wearing a mask, I wear earplugs, making sure people in your life know that you're sleeping, making sure that you're eating enough while you are working overnight to make sure that you're not just tired, but also not tired and really hungry and malnourished. So making sure that you are fueling your body as best you can. I wish that I had more to say for that, but I don't know of any, and I wish I did. All right. And then let's talk about anxiety and depression. So, a lot of times PMS happens and people treat it as if it's normal. So, unfortunately, PMS is not normal. A lot of times PMS happens with imbalanced hormones, and really commonly when all the levels are too low, because the endocrine system, so all of this that we talked about, and your neurotransmitter health are intimately related, and they will move in relation to one another. So when that happens, there is usually a lot going on. So in addition to the hormones being low, the other thing that impacts neurotransmitter a lot is gut health. And then the other thing that can impact, but it doesn't always quite as much. When I tested with Megan, I think they were all low, yeah, low hormones. I have anxiety, but have had a hysterectomy. Yeah, so the hysterectomy, so removing your uterus, as you can see, is only a small part of this. Your ovaries and your hypothalamus and your the way that your neurotransmitter, your endocrine, and your gut system, they still all interact, even though that structure is no longer there. So unfortunately, with your cycle, you can have anxiety. Now, we are talking specifically about anxiety with hormonal fluctuations, not only just anxiety in general, because that can be another topic as well. But when people have anxiety during ovulation, so here, let me turn this around again. All right, so when you peak the LH and the estrogen, and then you ovulate, what happens is that you have a dip in your estrogen before your progesterone comes up, because the corpus luteum is not actually, it takes a couple days to mature. So you can have a dip in your hormones right here as you ovulate, and especially if you take all of this and your normal baseline is moved down like this and they're just low overall, a lot of times ovulation will have symptoms of low hormones before things come up. Then your progesterone comes up and your estrogen levels off, and then your body gets used to it. And then before you get your period, anxiety and depression around, the time people would say they have PMS is here when they're all dropping off as well. So you can see it's relatively characteristic for the times that things are falling. So for that reason, unfortunately, it's not a quick answer on how to fix it, but at least you know that it's why it's happening. Crazy how important the gut is. Yes, learned so much by changing. Yeah, so the gut has a couple different reasons that it, how can you naturally balance hormones to increase fertility? Yeah, that's what we were talking about with all the sleeping and the making sure you're not under eating and all of that stuff. But I think that's going to have to be a different Periscope, because that is such a huge topic. Like I said, we have a 3-month program that Megan and I work with, and even then we don't cover everything. So it's really hard for me to just say, but I'm totally happy to make that a separate thing. So with the anxiety, I think when you know that it's happening, you can, I think it gives you insight into the fact that your levels are low, which you've already tested. Now, like we've been talking about, none of these things are quick fixes. So your gut is reacting and contributing to this. It goes both ways. That the inflammation that you can get from your gut or other systemic infections can actually lower all of the hormones at the same level. So it just basically depresses everything, because as the body fights an inflammation or infection, it's not going to put energy into reproduction. And so a lot of times the levels are actually going to improve as the other things improve. as the inflammation from the gut or whatever, from the skin, whatever's causing it, or an underlying infection, as that is treated. A lot of these things are, because they're a secondary problem, they become secondarily better as you improve. So it's, I wish it was more reassuring that you could just do something and fix it. It seems difficult because you're not necessarily in control of that. At the same time, it's not like you now have two problems. There's still that one primary problem that your body is basically in fight mode and not in reproduce mode. The good news is that once you treat that, then because it wasn't ever a separate problem, those levels rise. For me personally, I don't think this is going to happen all the time. My friend just had a ruptured cyst and a stone in her appendix because she works nights. Yeah, some people can tolerate working nights, and some people don't seem to do as well. I seem to be really affected by it. It's hard to tell. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the one thing that works really well for me for supporting levels is actually focusing on fat intake, which seems kind of counterintuitive. Most people don't focus on that, but if I undereat fats and I undereat complex carbs, my hormones get much, much worse. So I think that's one of the easier ways that you can intervene and increase your hormone production during a critical time while you're healing is I like to take a spoonful of coconut oil at night, or coconut butter is a little bit more palatable. I also add a bit of almond butter to smoothies, or I will eat something with, like, eat apple slices with almond butters or something that gives me like a fat load. That then the reason that works is because cholesterol is the precursor to all the sex hormones, and so making sure that you're replete in that cholesterol. I had a big scoop of coconut milk to smoothies. Good, yeah, that's a good thing to do. A lot of times that will boost their hormone production. Drinking lemon water, turmeric, and coconut oil. Yum, that sounds good. It will boost it just enough to minimize those symptoms until you can work on the other things. So many people are struggling with this, and there's so many ways to help that we'll do lots more periscopes, I promise, on the actual interventions that you can do. There's so many. Any specific suggestions for complex carb intake? Most specifically, I stick to over 150 grams of carbs every day. I think going lower for most people is too low. I know that's different than other things that you hear, but specifically if you're struggling with hormones, I think 150 is a good goal. I'm not saying you have to stick to that every single day. Some days can be more, some days can be less, but that is an average that I would stick to. And then for complex carbs, a lot of people get away with doing root vegetables, so like butternut squash, pumpkin, carrots, beets, like ginger, turmeric, like adding all those things. I get the ginger and the turmeric probably you won't get enough of. Trying to think, squashes. I actually have a whole blog post up on digprimal.com. It's called My Favorite Things, whole sources of complex carbs. So you can check that out. It's one of their great season for squash. Yeah, it really is. It tastes yummy right now. So you can go check that out for all of those ideas. And then if you're still not getting enough, I know most paleo people don't incorporate any type of grains. But if you're having a lot of problems with getting carbohydrates in, both Megan and I incorporate some rice. We do like sprouted, soaked buckwheat. What is your blog called? It's Dig Primal, DIGPRIMAL, digprimal.com. We've been eating rice. Oh, yummy. It's so good. My favorite is bone broth rice because you get all and white potatoes. That's amazing. Yeah, it's really good. I'm a big fan of potatoes and sweet potatoes. I kind of got burnt out on sweet potatoes, but white potatoes are really good. I like that the other thing about white potatoes is that they're really good for prebiotics. So if you're working on your gut, they're basically just fuel for your good gut bacteria. And rice noodles and soup, the best. Oh my God, that sounds amazing. Can you please make me some? I wish that we lived closer. Oh, thanks for typing that in. Ooh, I'll text you my favorite noodle. Ooh, yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I missed one of the questions. It looked like it was something about carbs. I'm so sorry I missed it. I didn't get to read it in time. Yeah, so you can, I would test, if you're going to put in like rice and white potato and things like buckwheat and what else is there? I'm trying to think. Things like chia seeds and some of those things, I would test first because you don't want to cause inflammation. Is a low carb diet bad for hormones? My friend is strict low carb. I personally think very much so. I think it's a gluten-free oats. Yeah, I think those are good. If you test them and they do well, I think those can be a really good source of carbs. I always add more nutrient things. Speaking from experience, I agree that we shouldn't get too legalistic about carbs. Yeah, it's really hard your body needs the input from the insulin and that balance to go along with the endocrine system. So when the carb load is too low, that puts your liver into overdrive into making sugar, and then it taxes the rest of your adrenal system. So it's really difficult to skimp on those things and find a balance. Some people seem to get away with it, but once you start having hormonal problems, they tend to build and it makes things worse. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I would just try it. A lot of times people are doing it for weight loss. I recently had surgery to have fibers removed. Do you know how hormones affect fiber growth? Yes, I will talk about that. A lot of times people will try to go low carb because of, especially if you're pregnant and nursing, yes, very much so. If you are trying to lose weight and cutting carbs, a lot of times hormonal issues, especially higher levels of cortisol, will keep you from losing weight. And then you start cutting carbs a lot and it sends you into this loop cycle. So even though people are nervous to start incorporating carbs, once you start and your hormone, it takes a couple months, but when your hormones begin balancing, a lot of times people feel like a lot of that stubborn weight actually comes off a little bit easier. And so, thanks for sharing, guys. A lot of times that weight will come off and then people feel better about that. If I've always had acne, does that mean I always had a leaky gut or always had too much estrogen? I would actually blame the gut first for long-term things, because a lot of times kids have messed up leaky guts just from food exposure and from allergens that they get exposed to, and then it can stay for your lifetime. I'm sure I've had leaky gut for most of my life as well. Probably too nutrient low. And yeah, like I would blame the gut first, but then potentially hormonal problems too, because they follow in puberty. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the only thing. It got crazy bad when I was pregnant too. Yeah. Often liver related, also true. Yes, so all of these things can be lifelong things that don't necessarily start in adulthood. They just get worse because a lot of these functions, that's when they're maturing. A lot of the hormonal axis is actually mature only when you hit your 20s, fully mature. And so, and a lot of times it's a couple years coming, if not since you were little. So that can happen. Okay, and then fibroids. Fibroids are definitely, I actually just talked about this on my podcast. I have a podcast with Brittany of Sparkle Kitchen named Wellness Beets, like the food, Beets. And I just episode 35 was all about, I talked about myomas and endometriosis. So if you want to check that out, there's more information on that. Fibroids are definitely hormonally related, but they're also immune system related. Anytime that that cells multiply in ways that they shouldn't, so endometriosis, fibroids, myomas, all of those things. I mean, cancer falls into this category, but that's also on its own because there's a genetic structural problem with each cell. But with fibroids, a lot of times it's the immune system not recognizing and not sending other attack cells of the immune system to clean it up. So then they grow, and they multiply. So not only do they have estrogen receptors that grow in response to estrogen, so a lot of those environmental toxins and everything that we talked about earlier, those play a role, but it's also the immune system not recognizing it and then not coming to clean it up. So immune system help with like the autoimmune protocol, focusing on building immune system with things like bone broth, vitamin C supplementation in food, eating organ meat, sardines, all of those things that we do to build our immune system can help with fibroids. It can at least slow them down. It's harder to reverse because you actually have to physically have your body recognize things that are already there and break into it versus stop it as it's happening. But it can happen. It's happened. I've seen it happen with some people. Where's my water? I don't think I have it. Anyway, swollen lymph nodes twice last 2 months. Doctor said shaving, but could it be stress or hormones? The stress is a good idea because stress impacts your immune system and your ability to fight infection. I would think that there would have to be a local source. So I think the shaving isn't a terrible idea, or it's not terrible, it's a good idea, or other things. So it can be, depending on where the lymph nodes are, it could be within a limb, or it doesn't have to be right there. Wherever the lymph nodes are, if they're around your groin, it could be any sort of infection. So you could have like a yeast infection, you could have like skin overgrowth locally somewhere if you like didn't change out your dirty workout clothes and got lazy like I always do, then you can get a little bit of bacterial growth. They invade a little bit, you get a response. So the immune system and stress related question is a really good one. I don't think it would be hormones, hormonally related necessarily. Any other questions? Did I miss anything? We'll talk about ways to deal with it and hair loss and other ones. I have them written down. I promise I won't forget. I'll be back to talk about it. And I always post on my Instagram account when I'm going to talk or do a Periscope and when and like what topic. So you guys can follow me there and then you'll be able to ask questions ahead of time. Do you think psoriasis is hormonal related as well? Psoriasis, I think, of more of an immune system related phenomenon. Hormones can impact it once it's already happening, but I don't think of it as a cause, if that makes any sense. Any other questions? Thanks for the hearts, guys. All right. I'll wait for a couple more minutes. Thanks for bearing with me while I fumbled around with all this stuff. Thanks for taking the time. Super helpful. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm glad you found it helpful. Make sure that you can email me. I have my email over on the blog. I love your sweater. Oh, thanks. Here, let's do a little. Oh, love your sweater too. Oh, thanks. It's the one I wear every day because it's so warm and cozy. I need to get like 5 more of them. All right. Well, if that's it, I will see you guys later. Can you speak to how much exercise is too much? Love it. Oh, thanks. Exercise, that's a good one. I'm writing that down. We need to talk about that. What's your Instagram handle? It's also digprimal.com. Here, let me write it down because it's my blog and my my handle everywhere. Thank you for touching on fibroids. I will check out your podcast. Awesome. So that's Dig Primal. And then the website's just digprimal.com. Yeah, no problem, guys. The exercise is too much. One of the things that Megan always talks about, and I think she's absolutely right, is that if you aren't recovering in terms of not feeling really fatigued, not being able to feel like you get off the couch, if you get headaches, if you're really dehydrated, if you feel lightheaded, any of those things, if you don't stop feeling that within half an hour of exercise, you're doing too much. And I agree with her. I think that's a really good thing. The other thing, like, I will talk about exercise separately because exercise is so important for hormonal health. It can really be a stressor that depletes us hormonally. So when I first got diagnosed with all of these problems with my hormonal system, I stopped strenuous activity entirely. I only did yoga and I walked. And it was really hard because I used to run marathons. I would do like boxing classes. I loved it. So I can totally relate to how much it sucks to give it up. But it's just another stressor that can be completely, I heard that it impacts thyroid. Absolutely. It impacts every single hormone. It impacts your insulin. It impacts your gut health because when you are working out strenuously, you don't get as much blood flow. That's the sympathetic response. And if you're constantly stressed out and in a sympathetic response, whether that stress is from exercise or from mental angst or anything like that, it can impact your gut lining significantly. So that's huge. So exercise, I would think, how do you convince someone that they're doing too much? They are constantly tired. That's a really hard one. And that brings up the question, like, how do you help anyone that doesn't want to do what they want to do? I think the best thing you can do is lead by example. That's what I try to do because the people in my life, there's things that I really want them, show them the scope. Yeah, you send her my way. I'm more than happy. I think a lot of people come for the fatigue and the acne and the hair loss and realize there's so much more important deep-seated health to be found there that they then begin to dig deeper. But that entry point of like the thing that really propels them in life is really important. So, maybe addressing with her or him the fatigue aspect of it and having them start little tiny changes. Like maybe she keeps exercising, they keep exercising, but she increases her carb intake. And then once she starts feeling a little bit better, things kind of come together and she begins to understand that there's an exercise component to it as well. It's really hard to force someone to do it when they don't want to and they don't want to see it. But I think starting slow and always showing them what you're doing is a good. I'm borderline hyperthyroid. Do you think there's a link to my short luteal phase? I think so because the hypothalamus is like your main endocrine signaling starter. So it fires signals to the rest of the endocrine system. The next step down is the pituitary. And it's in charge of, so this LH surge, there's also its cousin, FSH, which gets released at the same time and also peaks. I kind of left it out because it's not quite as relevant for this discussion as it is for others. But right next to it are cells that make the thyroid gland. Or the thyroid globulins that then go down to the thyroid gland and signal there. So depending on why you have hypothyroidism, about 7 to 8 people that have hypothyroidism a lot of times have immune system problems, so autoimmune issues. So starting to work on those things. Once the thyroid is working better and the output from there is better, because the thyroid then, when it releases its hormones, go back to communicate with the hypothalamus and the pituitary, and when that signaling gets off, all of the input from the pituitary can change. That can be if the hypothyroidism is causing the hormonal problems. Sometimes the hormonal problems are causing the hypothyroidism. Things like adrenal fatigue can make that worse. And when you deal with the adrenal fatigue, then it goes around and helps out the thyroid. So it depends on which one comes first. But if you do testing for autoimmunity against the thyroid, you can sort of begin to tell which one came first and start to intervene on one or the other. Oh, I need some water. Okay, all right. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you guys asking questions and getting involved in all the hearts. Oh, you guys are so sweet. I really had a great time doing this with you guys. Thanks for bearing with me with all my little mess ups. And I will see you back here. Thanks, Alex. Yay! Bye, Haley. I'm going to text you after I get off here. All right, bye, guys. Have a great day, and I will talk to you later. Goodbye.